Hey guys, this is Tech Howdy. I welcome you to another video tutorial where we are building this CMS application using ASP.NET Core 3 and Angular 10. In the last video tutorial, we implemented the required dependencies in the startup class. We created the activity service and we also recreated the database, basically reinitialized the database with the new DB sets, which is the token model and the activity model. So if you haven't watched that video tutorial, or if you haven't watched the videos in this video tutorial series where we are implementing the authentication service, the authentication handler, please go ahead and watch those videos before you watch this video tutorial. Now, in this video tutorial, we will go ahead and run our application. We will see how the attribute in the home controller, which is the authorize attribute, where we have implemented the custom admin authentication scheme, it works. So when someone tries to access the admin panel and when the request comes to the home page, the first thing that will be executed here is the attribute or the authorize attribute, and it will forward the request to the admin authentication handler that we have created. Since we don't have a token, so as we know that when the user does not have a valid token, the authentication will fail and the handle challenge async method will be executed. Now here we will forward the request of the user to the access denied path, and we will send the user to the access denied path. Now in the access denied path, we have specified that this path is inside the admin view in the account controller, and the view is called access denied. So go ahead and update this access denied path, because I forgot to mention that this account controller lives inside the admin area. So I have updated it in this video tutorial, so you can also update it. So we need to specify that our access denied path is part of the admin area. Now let's go ahead and run this application. And when we run this application, let me also put a breakpoint over here on the handle authenticate async method, so that we know that when somebody tries to access the home page, this method is called. So let's run the application. So the application is loaded, and here we will try to access the admin panel. So I'm going to go ahead and try to access the admin panel. And as soon as I try to access the admin panel, the breakpoint here on the handle authenticate async method is executed, or we have hit the breakpoint here. Now why we hit this breakpoint? It's because we have set the authorize attribute on the home controller. So any request that comes in to view this controller or the views inside this controller, it has to go through the authentication scheme that we have specified over here. Therefore, the request was forwarded to the authentication handler. Here, this request will not be executed further because the first condition itself is going to fail, because we don't have any cookies that contains the access token or the user ID. Therefore, when the authentication fails, as I mentioned in the video tutorial where we are creating this authentication handler, that the handle challenge async method will be executed. It will handle the authentication fails, and the user will be redirected to the access denied path. So let's hit continue, and here as you can see that the access denied path breakpoint is now hit. Now the user is being denied access to the admin panel and is being redirected to the access denied view that we have created in the admin area account controller. So now if I hit continue and go back to the browser, here I will see that the user is redirected to the access denied path. Let's go back, remove these breakpoints, and see it in action without the breakpoints. So if I go back here, let's remove this, go back to the client app. Now let's try to access the admin panel. And here, as we can see that the access is denied. Therefore, the only access that we have created is the, if we go back to the application and if I go to the account controller, and here the login controller, the login view. The login view is anonymous, which means that the request that comes in to access the login view does not need to have a token or any authentication scheme associated with it. So if I go ahead and try to access the login panel, which is located inside admin account login, I should be able to access it because we have not set any authentication scheme on this view. It can be accessed anonymously. Now we have the view over here. Now we need to enter the credentials to log in. So we have already created the login HTTP post method. Now inside the post method, the logic has been mentioned that when the user logs in, we will go ahead and create an auth token if the credentials provided is valid. But before we do that, we also need to make sure that inside the login view, we add some necessary code that is required here, because if the user already has a token, user is already logged in and has a token, and they are trying to access the login view, then we should not allow them to access the login view because they have already logged in once and they have a valid token. So let's implement that logic here before we go ahead and implement any other logic that we are going to add to the login process. So here, first of all, I'm just going to make this method that I have over here, the login method with the HTTP GET request to a task, to return a task of type action result. And then inside this login method, I am going to not just return the view, but first I need to validate certain criteria before I return the view. So I'm going to add a try catch block here. And if there are any errors, I'm going to log them in the log file. So I've added the log error statement over here where we are logging the errors using our logging service, which is built using Serilog. So you can watch the video tutorial if you haven't watched it, how to implement the logs in this application. Now here in the track block, I need to make sure that I check if the user is already logged in. And if they are already logged in, then I should be redirecting the user back to the view. And if the user is not logged in, then only I should be returning this view. So here I'm going to implement the logic which will check if the request that is coming in does not contain the access token in the cookie and does not contain the user ID in the cookie. So either or. So if we don't have the access token or if we don't have the user ID in the request, then we will return the login view, which basically means that the user is not logged in. But if the user has these values, which is the access token and the user ID, then we will redirect the user here to the home controller. And as soon as the user is redirected to the home controller, as we all know, that the request will be first redirected to the authentication schema, which will validate this request and validate the tokens. So here we are going to return back the action. So here I'll just redirect to a specific action, and the action name is index and the controller name is home controller. So that should be it for this login method. So we have completed this login method now. Now here we are getting this notification because we are returning a task, and we have an asynchronous method, but we are not awaiting for any result. So to avoid this, I can just say await. So use the delay task.delay method, and I'll just delay the task for 0. So this will basically solve the error. And also if we have the string URL set to null, we will try to get it from the view data. In the view data component, we will search for our view data property, we will search for the return URL value, and we will assign this value to the return URL. So we can set this flag in all the MVC views or the Razor views, what we want the return URL to be. So if the flag exists, then we will get the value from that flag. Otherwise, if the flag doesn't exist, then we know the default value will be null. So here we have the login method now complete, and we don't have to do anything else in the account controller. So that should be it for the account controller. Now In the login view that we have created for the admin to login, so if I go to the views folder, open the account controller view, and then go to the login view. Now here, when the user submits the login form, we know that the MVC page will reload. Therefore, what we need to do when we send the details, that's the email, the password, we need to send it via Ajax so that the page doesn't refreshes or reloads while we send the request, and waits for the request's response. Once the response is back from the server, we will show it to the user accordingly using Sweet Alert pop-up that we have already added. So let's go ahead and now work on the script section of this view, where we will implement the logic to send these details that are added in the form, or the login form, to the controller, that's the account controller, in the login method, which is the HTTP post login method. So let's start working on this logic. So here inside the login razor view, under the section for scripts, we will add another script tag that will contain all the custom logic that we will use to send the details of the user to the server or to our controller. Inside this custom script tag, we are going to write some custom jQuery code, and here we are using the shorthand for document.ready because document.ready is now deprecated. We can use this shorthand. Inside this shorthand, first thing I'm printing is on the console is to check if the document is ready, just to show you guys. So if I go back to the controller and refresh it and then go to the console, you will see that the document ready, basically the console is on the console, we see this string which says ready, which I am printing. Now if I go back, the next thing that I need to do inside the uh, inside the document.ready method is to listen for the click event, which basically is the login submit button that we have over here. I'm targeting the ID of the login submit button, and when the button is clicked, I need to make sure that we prevent the default event. The default event when the login button is clicked within a form tag which contains a button of type submit. When this button is clicked, the form will be submitted. So we need to prevent this default event, because once the form is submitted, the page will be reloaded and we will lose all the data on the form. Therefore, to prevent the default event, we will pass the event as the parameter in the constructor of the callback method, and we will prevent the default event from happening. Then we are using the form data object of the HTML5. The form data web API is available in the HTML5 browser. You can read more about form data API on the MDN docs, and I will provide the link in the video description. So just to keep it short, form data is part of your browser. If you're using an HTML5 browser, you will have a API access called as form data. Using this form data API, we can access the form objects on your DOM or on your document or document object model that you have loaded in the browser. If there are any forms, you can access the data in that form using the form data API. So I'm using this form data API to access the data from this form that we have on this view. Now, to get all the data, we can target the get method of the form data, and we have to specify the name or of the property that we need to get the data from. So in my case, I need to get the data from the input for email. Therefore, I will to get the value, I need to get it through the name of these uh, input element. Now here I don't have any name tag, but if you go back to the browser, the MVC Razor view will create a name tag for your elements. So here you can see for the email, you have a name attribute created, and the value for that name attribute is email. So your MVC Razor view will create this for you. If we go back here, we are getting the value of this input for name email using its name attribute. So all the input tags, we are targeting their name attribute to get the values. I've created a login view model here with the default values, and I am creating a login view model object here. That's because I need to send this object in the HTTP request that I'm sending to the login method. So if I go back to the account controller, go to the login method, here you can see we need to attach the login view model in the body of our HTTP request. And that's exactly what we are doing here. We are attaching the login view model to the body of our HTTP post request that we are creating in this Ajax method. Now I'm not going to explain in detail what each and every attribute of the Ajax method means, because this is not a tutorial for jQuery. It's a tutorial that we are creating a CMS application. So you should be aware if how to use jQuery methods. So Ajax basically is a method that we use to send data to the server without having to refresh or reload the page. So the data will be sent and we will then wait for the response. If the response is successful, which means if we receive a OK response from the HTTP request that we sent in, then we will use sweet alert pop-up to notify the user that the login was success. And if we receive an error response from the server, then we will show the pop-up for sweet alert to display the error. Now in the footer of the error pop-up, I need to display all the errors that we receive. So we are going to receive whatever errors that we get returned in the response. I've created an extension method where I'm passing all these errors to this extension method, and we will create a unordered list of all the errors using some jQuery for loop, and we will display it in the footer. So that should be it for the login method. Now we can save this, go back to the browser and refresh it to make sure that we don't have any errors, and we don't have any errors. So everything is now loaded fine. The next thing that I want to do is go ahead and test this method. So let's quickly type in admin.@admin CMS and then enter the password, which is test@123. Now if I go back here to the application, go to the login login view or login method and put a breakpoint here on the login method. Let's see if this method has been hit or if we get any errors, and if we do get any errors, we will debug it. So let's go back here. Let's now hit login. Now we don't see anything. Okay, so yes, the method was hit. There was a slight delay, but the method was hit. And here we have hit the breakpoint. Here if we look at the model that we received, if we open it, we have the admin.@cms.com, the password, and the remember me as default was set to false when we instantiated this JavaScript object that we created over here. Since the value was not provided by us, therefore the default value was set to false. Now we are awaiting for the response, correct? So now if I go back here to the application, to the account controller, and let's for now just wait and see what response we get. Then we can debug in step by step the auth method. So let's go press F10. Our model state is valid, so we go inside the if condition. Now we hit the try block, and now we're trying to get a JWT token. Let's see if we receive any token. If we don't receive any token, then we can debug this auth method to understand why we didn't receive the token. Now let's hit F10, and here we have received a JWT token. If I look at this, if I expand this JWT token, you will see that there is a token created which is encrypted. Then we have the role as administrator. We have the response info. In the response info status model, we have the refresh token, we have the expiration time, and we have the username as admin. Now before we send the response back, let's go to the Azure Data Studio and check if in the database if there is any information created in the token model table that we created. So I'll go and start the Azure Data Studio. And here in Azure Data Studio, let's log in to our database or server. So let's quickly open the database which contains the tables for tokens and then edit this tokens table. As you can see that there is a token created and we have the user ID. There's a token created for the user ID which is starting for A16. If we look at the ASP.NET user tables, this is the ID for the admin user. Basically, we have created the token for the admin user. We have saved the encryption key for the token here for the refresh token, and to decrypt the JWT token, the keys are saved here. This is basically the GUID that we created to encrypt the tokens. These keys are now saved here. When the request comes in by the user to view a protected view, we can decrypt these tokens using this particular keys. There's an expiry time and there's a last modified date when the token was created, and the value of the refresh token as well, and our client ID. So we have these details saved here. The user is logged in. Now if we go back here to the application and then press F10, the cookie is created for the JWT token. The cookie is created for the username, user ID. We logged in the log file that the user with this email address is logged in. We return a success response and let's press F5. Now let's go back here to our admin homepage. Now you can see we have successfully logged in. We can access the admin homepage. If we go back to the application tab in our browser, look at the cookie section, click on the link here, you will see there are some cookies generated for here. For the user, we have a user ID, we have an access token and username generated. Now if we look at these values, these are secure, which basically means that any JavaScript in your application cannot access these values. We also see that these cookies are encrypted. So this is not a JWT token because the JWT token is now encrypted using iData protection service that we are using from Microsoft ASP.NET Core. So basically we have added 2 layers of encryption on the cookie. So to make this cookie more secure, we have a username which is not encrypted, that's fine, but we have the user ID and the user token encrypted. We have the anti-forgery token, and we will talk about this in detail when we implement anti-forgery tokens to prevent CSRF attacks in our application in the upcoming video tutorials. But now we have successfully implemented tokens in our application, login system in our application. The admin can log in and now access the protected view. Let's try to refresh and see, yes, the tokens still exist and the admin is not able to be redirected to the login view. If I go try to access the login view, as we have implemented the logic here in the login view, where if the user already has these tokens, we will then send the user back to the home page of the admin panel. If the user does not have this token, then we redirect the user to the login page. So if I go back here to the browser, and now if I try to access login, let's try to do that. As you can see, I'm being redirected to the home page. I cannot access the login page because I have the cookies over here. So if I try to delete these cookies and now try to access the admin page, I get an access denied, which is obvious. I don't have the access token and access is denied. Now if I try to log in, I should be able to access the login page. That's it for this video tutorial, guys. We have successfully implemented the authentication for the login for the admin. In the upcoming video tutorials, we will talk more about the anti-forgery tokens to prevent CSRF attacks. And if you have any questions, use the comment section. All the code that we have used in this video tutorial will be available in our DevOps repo. The link will be provided in the video description. Please don't forget to like and subscribe our channel Tech Howdy. Thank you once again. Goodbye.